Hello, this is George Coutsoudis, and you're listening to the Film Swap Podcast.
Here is a motion picture film. Let's tidy up this tangle of film by putting it on a reel.
Hello, listeners, and welcome to the Film Swap Podcast. My name is David Seeley, and I'd very much like to introduce you to my esteemed co-host, but I actually can't remember who he is.
Hey, David, come on. It's the ecstatic gaucho, Mr. Jonathan Pritchard Barrett.
Oh, yes, it's all coming back to me now. It's all coming back to me. Kirsten Dunst actually sent me a folder and an audio cassette, but I haven't had a chance to check it out yet. But yes, Jonathan, welcome. And you'll have heard the velvety tones of our guest, George Coutsoudis, actor, singer, fitness instructor, and what else? How many other things are on your CV, George?
That sums it up, buddy. Thank you. Master of all trades, jack of all trades, master of none.
Well, that much I know is not true because I've for many years I've tread the boards with George on stage, doing pantos and various things, and he's got a new record out which is called Rise and Shine. So that's available wherever you find your music. So go out there and check that out, folks, when you get a chance, because it's brilliant. And
Thanks, David.
George, can you tell us a little bit about the record? Because you've got like a lot of different kind of styles and things on there, don't you?
Well, it's a collection of 10 songs over from as early as back as 2004, even 1999, actually. So it's just
Wow.
Yeah, it's that's why there's not really a through line of style, so to speak. But I think if there was an overriding theme, it would probably be one of musical theatre, because the songs are kind of maybe try and tell a story, and they got the kind of sense of almost melodrama in some of them. So it's not particularly commercial as such, but I think it's got a storytelling through line, which I think musical theatre might be. Or musical play might be the best way to describe the album as a through line. Yeah.
Well, it's absolutely brilliant, and folks should go and check it out. And also, Georgia, you and I recently, along with my son, we collaborated on a new recording, haven't we? Which should be seeing the light of day over the next sort of maybe in the next month or so. That might be going out to the public. So we had a bit of fun doing a little something.
Lots of fun, yes.
So we'll get that out there pretty soon as well. But tonight we're here to talk about memories, aren't we? And not just memories about me and George and our creative exploits, but we're talking about film memories, remembering and contemplating and forgetting. Yes, that's right. And healing as well. I thought that these films, both of the films that we're talking about tonight, in a certain way, are about kind of dealing with grief. The first film we're going to talk about tonight is the one that Jonathan and I have put forward. Jonathan, do you want to just take a minute to introduce Aftersun?
Yes, well, Aftersun came out 2 years ago in 2022. It's written and directed by Charlotte Wells. It was her first feature film. She made a few shorts. And it stars Paul Mescal, who is an Irish actor, and his sort of breakout role was in this TV series in 2020 during lockdown called Normal People. But he is just about, in a few months, to go global, become a megastar with the release of Gladiator 2, which he is going to be starring.
Yes.
Ridley Scott's sequel to Gladiator, the famous Gladiator. And Frankie Corro, who plays his 11-year-old daughter. And it's basically about their holiday in Turkey in the 90s. And it's an absolutely terrific film. And Sight and Sound said it's one of the best films of 2022. In fact, it was top place in their poll. And the National Board of Review over the other side of the pond, they said it's one of the best films of the year. It's a film that everybody should see if they haven't seen it yet.
Well, thanks, Jenna. In a few minutes, we're gonna talk a little bit more about that in depth. But the second film we'll be talking about tonight is an absolute bona fide classic, and George recommended this film. George, do you want to just briefly introduce it? We'll talk about
Yes.
it more in depth in the second half.
Yes, it's Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind, and it was made and distributed 2004, starring Kate Winslet and Jim Carrey. And back in those days, especially, Jim Carrey was pretty much seen as the comic buffoon actor, and he does that brilliantly. His comedic timing is genius. But so this was one of his ways of branching out into perhaps being seen as a bit more of an actor in a drama, which it was. And it's directed by Michel Gondry. I don't really know any of his other films, to be honest, but I think he's a French director. It seems a lot of the movies he's made have been French. Yeah, I think Eternal Sunshine was something that he put together, and it's hard-hitting questions about almost questioning: is it better to have loved and lost than never to have loved at all, and whether or not we choose to, are those painful memories there to serve us, to help us progress in the future? And there's also, of course, the lovely memories that go along with any situation. So yeah, great film, very interesting movie. Look forward to chatting more about that.
Yep.
Yeah, definitely. Brilliant. All right, well, thanks, guys. Well, shall we start then tonight with Aftersun? This was a film really that Jonathan put forward, because when we were, George proposed his film, and then we thought of something that would match with it. And so we started talking about films that had to do with memory and things like that. And eventually, Jonathan, I think you had just seen this film very recently over the holidays,
Yep.
and you had suggested it. And I think you said too you wanted to talk about a film that I hadn't seen before.
Well, it's almost all of the films that I suggest you've already seen, but I think this is the second time I've suggested something that you haven't seen, which was a real victory for me.
Well, yeah, I think it's a testament to the fact, really, that I've spent a great deal of my life sitting in front of screens looking at stuff. And of course, I have a lot of great memories about that, but it is great when to see something new to me that I haven't seen before. And I'm really glad you did suggest it, because I really, really enjoyed it. I thought it
Really
was
good.
quite a perceptive and interesting film, and quite moving as well. Did you want to take a minute, Jonathan, just to maybe tell listeners a little bit more in depth about the film if they haven't seen it?
Yeah, well, I sort of introduced the cast. I mean, there's just two main sort of actors in it, I guess. Paul Mescal and Frankie Corro, who is this young dad. I guess he's like 30, 31, 32, something like that. And his daughter is 11. And he's sort of split up from his sort of the girl's mum, but they're still on sort of amicable terms. You see, this comes across during the sort of course of the film. And basically, this will go on holiday to Turkey or the Mediterranean. It becomes clear that it's Turkey. And they're sort of hanging out, really. I mean, there's not an enormous amount happens, but somehow, gradually through the film, a sort of sense of foreboding builds. There's some sort of emotional, extremely well conveyed, but it's because you're sort of slightly wondering how she's managing to do it, considering there's not a lot is happening, but there's this emotional tension is building. And by the end, you get to, it's one of those films where the end of it, all is revealed, really. And it's an extremely moving sort of finale. And, well, it's a really, I think it's an incredibly moving and sort of beautiful, heartbreaking film. And I'm not surprised that it was such a critical success. And it's it just really hit me, between the wherever it is that these films hit you. Yeah, I thought it was absolutely brilliant.
Yeah.
Great performances. Paul Mescal, I could see. Oh yeah, so I wonder if this was the one that old Ridley Scott saw and said, "Yes, this guy is the guy for my next big movie."
Maybe.
Yeah,
Yeah, although I mean, I don't know what part he's playing in this new Gladiator film, but presumably if it involves hacking people up with swords, maybe the connection isn't quite so obvious, but clearly his talent as an actor, is certainly on display. So
yeah,
yeah.
exactly.
So
Yeah,
good, George. This again, like us, this was your first time seeing the film.
Wow. Yes, this film. I hear you, Jonathan. In terms of at the end, it's like a real punch in the guts. And
yeah,
actually, through the film, Dave and I were chatting about other things, and I said, I'm 40 minutes in, and is anything going to happen? Because
yeah,
it is just, and then boy oh boy, do things happen. I mean, it's and like you say, when it starts to bring in that undercurrent of something's not right, and you're not quite sure what it is, and
yeah,
but I was just saying as well, isn't that like what life is like in terms of things just amble along, and when it's flowing and it's content, it's all smooth and it's easy going, and then suddenly it's not. And I think that's what for me, what the film depicted so well was just the sense of life going on, happening, like almost you're a fly on the wall, seeing these people, and then all of a sudden the drama builds, and then like you said, that those last few minutes with the song Under Pressure, and
oh wow,
I mean,
oh boy.
wow, wow.
Yeah, I mean, the interesting thing is because so I watched it first time. I watched it all in one go, and when I rewatched it, I actually watched the first because it's only an hour and a half long,
Mm.
or an hour and 40 minutes. So I watched the first half hour, and then because I knew it was half an hour, and I was very conscious then that very little, as you said, it was 40 minutes, nothing's happened. I was aware that it was half an hour in, and very little happened. But one of the interesting things is once you've seen it once, it's one of those films that really bears with watching again because you
Yeah,
get all these little clues right at the beginning.
yeah,
And it's almost one of those films that starts where it ends or ends where it starts. It's a sort of
yeah.
circular one.
It's
Uh,
one. It's one of those nice ones that builds up because it kind of it's layered and it sort of just gradually sort of peels things back a little bit at a time. And each little moment, like you say, retrospectively, after when you reach the end of the film, then you can kind of connect the dots and kind of say, yeah,
yeah,
actually, now I remember that. And that's kind of how the film's framed because it sort of shows this. It's about the story of this young girl who's about 11 years old going on holiday with her father, but it's kind of framed by the little girl as an adult. And
yeah,
she's sort of remembering back about this holiday. And obviously, when you're 11, you're not necessarily as perceptive as you might be as an adult. And even when you're an adult, when you're with people all the time and you're constantly spending time with them and just doing the sort of going through the banal day to day sort of activities, you don't always necessarily pick up on those little details and those little clues about how people are feeling, what they might be going through, you know, some of the things that maybe they don't say or they maybe it comes out in different ways. And I think that's what the real power of the film is because in a sense you kind of feel at the beginning like you were saying, it feels like nothing's happening. And it's kind of like that kind of banal sort of holiday, like when you go on these package holidays and you spend the first day traveling on buses and planes and it's boring
mm.
and it's uncomfortable and you always end up arriving late and there's always some kind of complication that, causes issues. And so, and then you get to this place and on these holidays, a lot of time, all you're really doing is just you're kind of suddenly you're stuck with people and you're just trying to find things to do, but you're not in the comfort of your own home and stuff. You're away. So you're sort of having to renegotiate your, activities and stuff around where you are and what's available to you. And what everybody wants and how they're feeling and things. So I thought the film captured that really well.
Yeah.
This father, and he doesn't obviously live with his daughter all the time. He's obviously separated from the mother, so he maybe doesn't see her and live with her all the time. So that adds another layer of complexity to the relationship when they're suddenly together all the time in this hotel in this other country, and they're kind of there faced with having to spend all that time together and have to work it out in a way that they maybe don't have day to day, that interaction that they don't have on a day-to-day basis normally. So
Yeah.
so that I think was brilliant, and as you say, just as the film progresses, you just gradually continue to pick up on that all may not quite be right
Yeah.
and then that gradually progresses towards the end of the film, and it just builds up to this very powerful, really, really wrenching climax, which was quite moving, I
Very
thought.
moving. Very moving. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's really that their relationship. Followed, read a few interviews and watched a few interviews and things, and I think they apparently went on holiday before the filming started. They were sort of sent off to that resort or a similar resort together to just sort of hang out,
Oh, wow.
and they had a fortnight together, just hanging out, getting to know each other. But it's extraordinary, these because she's 11 or something, but it really does seem like that they're sort of father and daughter. It's
Mm, mm,
extraordinary, really amazing performance, and there's just this sort of tenderness. It's not just a convincing relationship, but it's an extremely tender and moving relationship.
yeah.
And there's lots of these gestures that are sort of non-verbal but extremely sort of beautiful. Like funnily enough, being called Aftersun, there's one bit where he's putting Aftersun on her.
Yes.
There's another bit where she's putting on Aftersun on him,
Yes.
and sun cream at other times. And then there's near the beginning of the thing, he covers her up with a bed sheet when she's sort of gone to sleep on the bed, and then towards the end, she covers him up with a bed sheet, and these sort of beautiful gestures like this, and
Yeah.
it's just amazing.
I quite enjoyed it when she mentioned about that she'd kissed that boy.
Oh, yeah.
And you immediately going to think, okay, he's going to go off on one about, maybe get a bit angry that she did it. And he was completely the opposite. He just said, oh, well, he's your age. That's all right then. And just, and accepting it as someone who's coming of age, which I think was also, one of the themes in the film about this young girl who's starting to hit that time in her life where she's starting to come of age, and she hangs out with those slightly older kids, and she sees the boys and the girls, kissing each other. And yeah, I quite like that moment. I also found it was one of those tender moments that you're talking about where he almost guided her with that. It was wonderful.
Yeah, yeah.
Did you get a sense of that he was a bit guarded though, because that is something, because he obviously very much was always trying to stay composed and not
True.
lose his temper or say or do anything that was going to be sort of contentious. So there was that sort of level to it that I kind of picked up on, that he quite often, like at the bit where she lost the goggle,
Yes.
and he was clearly like a little bit annoyed and angry about it, but he at the same time was very like, I'm not going to lose my cool here. I'm going to.
He
So
definitely
I
had
thought that was good.
he had an edge about him, didn't he? He had some.
Yeah.
Definitely, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I guess one bit of the film that, because we sort of get to know that. Well, I mean, it's a little bit difficult without giving too much of the plot away.
Yeah.
But essentially, well, I have to give a little bit of plot away now, so be prepared. But essentially, all is not well with the dad, and we get the feeling that he's not around for a lot longer after they sort of part at the end of the film. And one other thing, and you see this card on the floor at one stage, which sort of says, always know that I've loved you. And it's almost like a suicide note in a way,
Yes.
which is, I mean, it's the whole thing is just extremely heartbreaking. So I wonder if the whole thing is because at one stage, he says to her, "Live wherever you want to live and do whatever you want to do." That's it. That's like his philosophy. It's almost like he's sort of giving her his sort of final life advice
Mm.
in some ways. Which, but as you say, that I mean, the whole point is that she thought it was a lovely. Towards the end, he said, "Do you enjoy your holiday?" She said, "Yeah, it's the best holiday ever."
Mm.
They've got like basically there's two holidays going on. There's like his
Yeah.
holiday, and there's she's
Yeah.
having a hell of a time with her dad, and he's having this. I don't know what's going on, but it's all is not particularly
There is a stream, and it becomes more apparent as it goes on that he's in a little bit of a emotional crisis, isn't he? And
exactly.
it's quite interesting too about like things like when he would there's this lovely moment when they're sort of on the cusp of having a row, and he says something about, oh well, we'll organize to get you some singing lessons.
Mm.
And then she kind of goes, will you stop doing that, stop offering to pay for things, because I know you can't afford it. And there's obviously, hints all the way through that he might be struggling
Financial.
financially and with
Yeah.
work and things like that. And there's that lovely bit where they're looking at the Turkish mats in the shop, and the guy comes back and he's picked one out that he likes, and it's something like 800 pounds. And he
Mm,
kind of goes, oh right, okay. And they kind of leave it, but then he sort of sneaks back when she's off doing something else with her friends, and he buys it anyway. So
yeah.
you kind of think like there's a bit of an impulsiveness to him in terms of his,
Yes. Good point.
he's maybe not quite responsible financially with his money and things like that. So
Mm,
that's a something that's obviously quite stressful for people, and there's a lot of anxiety and things built up around making ends meet and being
yeah.
able to provide, and to be able to, he's there with his daughter on holiday, so obviously he wants to give her a nice holiday and give her all the things that she wants, but sometimes you have to be realistic about what you can achieve.
Mm,
So I thought all those things just make it really interesting that you can pick apart the film, and much like she's doing in the film as an adult, you can look back over the film after and kind of think about, oh yeah, actually I remember that bit now, and oh, I remember
so,
when he was said that. And and you sort of start to piece that together, that you can start to see in retrospect, you can see that all's not right with him, and you can
yeah.
understand a little bit about how he's feeling, so that he's how he's struggling.
And that's
And
why rewatching it is so good because when I first watched it like you, I thought, well, nothing happening here. But actually, even from the beginning, stuff is sort of happening.
Mm.
But it's
mm,
only in retrospect that you sort of,
yeah,
once you've seen the end, that you can sort of pick up a lot more,
yeah, yeah,
I would say.
Yes, the one part as well where she's interviewing him and she says, "So when you were 11 years old, where did you think your life would
Yeah.
be?" And he gets
yeah,
he get kind of that kind of mist descends around him again, that kind of edge, that kind of foreboding. Something he didn't like that question, and he gets edgy about that question, doesn't he?
yeah,
Yeah. Maybe just also going towards how maybe his life, he wasn't happy. He didn't imagine it was where he thought it would be. Yeah.
yeah.
That's very moving. It sort of explains quite a lot of his issues, it appears to at least.
Yeah,
What he discusses there. What he reveals to her.
Mm.
Yeah, it's terrific, and but it also another thing that's quite nice is that he has this sort of very sort of spacious feel. There's all these paragliding sort of shots,
Mm.
basically there on the beach,
yeah.
and then it just sort of the camera goes up to the sky. You just see these people just sort of drifting through the sky.
Well, yeah, and he seems quite fascinated by that. There's quite often he's always like, they might have a little bit of a mildly uncomfortable conversation, and then he'll look off into the distance at these gliders, and it almost kind of represents this sort of this freedom and this carefree,
Hmm.
sort of. I mean, I don't know if you guys have ever done it, but I've been on holidays where sometimes where you'll be sitting, sort of having your lunch and you'll look out and see people water skiing or doing stuff like that, and there's always that little part of you that kind of thinks, "Ooh, I wouldn't mind doing that." That'd be quite cool. That'd be quite fun. But of
Mm.
course, you might not, for whatever reason, you might not do it because either it's not practical to do it, or maybe you don't want to do it that bad that you want to actually put yourself into that situation. So I could sort of, I mean, I like those little moments where you sort of looked away. I mean, I think the film has lovely little bits of observation, you
Yeah.
know,
Yeah.
about, people's behavior and their thoughts, and it kind of conveys those things.
I enjoyed the period piece element where you had your the songs to take you back to a certain era that they played,
Yeah.
and also of
Yeah.
course just seeing people lounging around the pool without a smartphone or a device, just hanging out. No nothing, no screens to distract. It was really refreshing to see. Actually, it was
Yeah.
nice to be a
Yeah.
part of that.
Yeah, absolutely. It kind of reminded me a bit of
Is that one?
Perfect Blue, yes, and we commented on the fact that it was a sort of a bit of a period piece in terms of the technology about the computers and the internet and everything, and
Yeah.
how kind of nice that was to, in a way, to look back and kind of go, God, yeah, I
Mm.
remember when stuff was like that, and compared to today.
Yeah.
And so,
Well,
yeah.
that was one of the things that helped me sort of locate it in time, because I was
Mm,
thinking, when is this exactly? And I said, wait a second, yeah, they're sitting there. There's no smartphones, no tablets,
yeah,
reading
yeah.
books.
Well,
Yeah.
yeah, if that father and daughter were on holiday today in
Oh.
Turkey, she'd be on her iPad or on her phone, doing the,
Yeah.
like this, and they wouldn't be communicating, and
Well,
in a way
yeah.
that would make it worse for him because obviously he's already struggling to feel like he's making those connections and things. So if you can imagine adding in that layer of everyone just kind of
Yeah. Yeah.
like
Yeah.
that, and not actually sort of, connecting with each other.
Yeah. Not
So
being present.
Yeah.
yeah. So
That's
it
it.
does give you that perspective, I think, as well, just in
Yeah.
terms of that extra layer of alienation, really, that technology can bring to life, can it? If you
Yeah.
think about it.
Yeah.
So
That's true.
yeah, yeah.
And
Interesting. Sorry, is right there.
no, well, I was going to say you mentioned the music, and she sort of brings sort of emotions and things out of those songs that I hadn't really noticed before.
Mm,
Blur one, and it turns it from a sort of, I don't know, sort of
Yes.
pop song into this very spooky, weird
Yes.
song, and
yeah,
then also the David Bowie one. And now
yeah.
I'm never going to listen to that song in the same way again. It's gone from being a good sort of funk pop song to being this
It's-
Well, that's
profoundly
the thing.
moving.
I think she brings out the lyrics because I think it's something with a lot of times in pop songs, like good pop songs that have good lyrics. You don't always, people don't always sort of pick up on the actual meanings of things as much because it's buried behind a catchy tune and things.
Yeah,
And I think especially with Under Pressure, because that's the kind of song that sometimes when they use that in films and stuff, it actually really annoys me because it'll
right.
be like a really sort of obvious thing, like, someone will be late to get to a meeting or something, so they'll put Under Pressure on the soundtrack, and you're like, "Ooh, that's just really annoying and unimaginative and stuff." But in this case,
Wow.
because they kind of remix it a little bit as well, don't they, and
Yeah,
bring a
tweet it.
little bit of the ambience out of it,
Mm,
and the context of the images that you're seeing as well does really make it incredibly powerful moment.
yeah,
Very sort of gut wrenching and almost harrowing sort of feeling that you get at that moment, and it's very, very powerful.
yeah, yeah.
That, that,
Exactly, it
that
really
that
is.
line, "This is our last dance," and he's holding his daughter.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, intense, intense.
It
Yeah.
was. It was amazing because it even kind of sneaks up on you because initially the song when it starts and they have this kind of club scene and the dancing, and they've kind of hinted at it throughout the film. They've kind of had little snippets of that, of just to sort of frame it with her memories and things. But it's at that moment when it starts and it just sort of gradually builds into this, almost in a sense, almost like it becomes almost like a horror movie, doesn't it? In a sense, because of all the emotions and things that well up in it, and you begin to really, it hits home what's really happening.
Yeah, it is
And
like a
so,
horror movie. Reminded
yeah,
me a bit of Jacob's Ladder. These sort of
Mm.
yeah, yeah,
weird.
it's very much in that style. Jacob's Ladder. That's a good comparison, actually, in
Yeah.
terms of the style of that sequence in the film, actually. So,
So, what do you think of the strobe bits that sort of
mm,
intersperse it? I guess that's what we're talking about here. I mean, but it
yeah.
happens in a few other places as well. What do you think of those?
Well, I think they're a good sort of metaphor for his state. Is he's in obviously in a state of anxiety and depression or whatever it is, a
Yeah.
combination of those things, and that kind of the imagery of the kind of the club and the flashing lights and all the people sort of bouncing around and the chaos of it is sort of a good a reflection of maybe his inner, his psyche and his feelings, and so I think it works really well.
Hmm.
um
I took it. One of the interpretations I had of that scene was I thought it was almost him going back in time to where he met his partner, and then of course she gave birth to this beautiful young girl who's now coming of age, and I wasn't sure if I got that. I thought the whole juxtaposition of everything together, that kind of memory infused to when they were dancing together in that moment. But perhaps I don't know. I'm not sure if I got the wrong end of the stick there, or I don't
no,
know.
well, I mean,
Yeah,
I don't think there's any wrong end to
yeah,
the
yeah,
stick. I mean,
yeah,
it's like it's the interpretations are open. I think even the ending is
yeah.
fairly ambiguous, isn't it? Because you can assume that there's been some sort of a tragedy or some sort of a, there's a sense of loss and things there, but you don't necessarily have to assume, that it's,
Dead.
like a suicide or
Yeah.
whatever. It could be any number of ways that you could interpret that.
Yeah.
you
That's
know
true.
um
Very true.
it could just be that they lost touch, or they don't sort
See,
of have a relationship anymore. They become estranged.
wow,
Yeah.
that's yeah.
But it could just be that. You just don't know, do you?
No.
But it's that reflecting about this as an adult, thinking back, because I mean, I'm sure we all do it. I'm sure you guys do it, and I know I do it. That sometimes now as an adult, I can think back about things that happened when I was younger, and will have a different perspective, and I'll kind of think, oh, I never thought of that, or oh, maybe it was that this, or I maybe thought it was that, but maybe it was this. You do that all the time, don't you? And I think the film works on that level, doesn't it? About thinking
Yeah.
about reflecting back on something that happened when you were 11, and
Yeah.
sort of thinking, hey, wait a minute, was this
Mm.
going on? And maybe I
Mm.
just didn't realize that at the time. And that's why I think it's quite an interesting film, and it works really well. It really captures that well, I think. So
Very much. Yeah, it's
yeah,
terrific. I think it's actually brilliant stuff.
yeah,
Yeah, thanks, James, for introducing me to that film. That was a real experience. It's
Good.
yeah,
right.
amazing, and I think a lovely partner to the other one as well. I think I like the way you all tied it together.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Well,
it's pretty.
well, definitely too. That I mean, is it fair to say maybe is there anything else that you guys wanted to say about Aftersun?
No, I think. I mean, I could probably go on and on, but I think I've said the main.
Yeah, and I think we wanted to leave a little bit for for the listeners if they
Okay.
haven't seen the film.
Yeah.
To definitely encourage them to go and check it out, and rather than us totally pick it all apart and sort of
Yeah.
explain everything to them, that it'd
Yeah.
be good for them to go and bring their own sort of perspective to it and watch it and experience it, and see how they interpret the film as well. So
Yeah. Definitely.
um, and of course, folks, drop us a line. Let us know what you think about it. If you've seen it, or if you haven't, or if you do, check it out after you listen to the show. Drop us a line and let us know what you think, and we'd love to hear a bit more about it. And it is true, George, like you were saying, the film that you've put forward tonight, a bona fide classic, I think it's fair to say. I mean, the film, it was amazing when I was rewatching it yesterday. I realized that it's 20 years old now.
Wow, 20 years. Yes, indeed.
Which,
Indeed.
is totally gobsmacking to me, because it does, when you first suggested it, I thought, oh, well, that's quite a recent film. I was like, oh, no, that's sort of a more newer kind of sort of film, but it's not actually. It's 20 years old. And it very much kind of deals with some of the same territories about what we've been talking about with Aftersun, and that it's about people reflecting on the past and maybe what went wrong, but also maybe what went right. And about, I think Jonathan summed it up quite beautifully, or actually, I think it was you, George, that summed it up quite beautifully about the fact that the film is very much about, is it better to have loved and lost than to not have loved at all? Is that how the saying goes?
Yeah.
I mean, that's a really nice encapsulation about what the film's about what you let go.
Yeah.
Because, when a relationship doesn't work out, you're not just losing the bad bits, but you're losing the good bits as well.
Yeah.
And that's it's quite an important thing to consider. So on that note, shall we take a little break? And then after we come back, we're going to talk about, let me make sure I get the title right, because it's a bit of a mouthful. The eternal sunshine of the spotless mind.
That's
Is
right.
that right?
Perfect.
Good. Good. Because I think over the years I've gotten into some bad habits about sort of shortening the title down. So then now I struggle with actually saying it properly at all.
I always call it the eternal spotlight of the sunless mind.
Brilliant. All right, well, folks, listen very carefully to the next messages, because I think they're going to widely improve your life, and you're going to want to remember them. So listen carefully, and we will be back in literally mere seconds to talk about eternal sunshine of the spotless mind.
Thanks for listening to the Film Swap podcast. If you like this podcast, please consider giving the show a rating or leaving a review. This helps other listeners find the show. You can follow the Film Swap on social media. We're on Twitter and TikTok at Film Swap UK, on Instagram at Film Swap Media, and on YouTube at Film Swap_podcast, and at Facebook at Film Swap the podcast.
And we're back. Welcome back, listeners. And welcome back, Jonathan, and our special guest, actor and musician, George Coutsoudis, who actually, he's there at home in his recording sort of studio. What would you call that room? Do you have a name?
It's an all sorts. It's the recording studio. It's a basically family put everything that they need to store in here. But it's nice because it sucks in the sound, So when I record, it's like the sound is dead. So the more stuff, the merrier. So it's like natural soundproofing.
Oh, well, yeah, it's brilliant. It's a brilliant place, because we've done a few sort of recordings and stuff in there, haven't we, over the years?
Yes.
And it's a great place. And actually, George just literally lives about sort of 30 meters that away.
As the crow
But
flies.
he's at home tonight. They're looking after his cat. You see, we've got another special guest.
That's it. There we go. Hello, Rocky.
Yeah, is that Rocky there? Yeah.
He's just chilling out. He's just chilling
Look
out.
at that. Stunning. And George, as usual, Jonathan has his dog at his feet as well.
Is your pooch by your feet? Wow, okay.
So nice. It's our sort of silent co-host on the show.
If I get her in.
If you can get her in.
Oh, sweetheart. There we go. Nice.
Yes. And well, I can't. My cat's obviously off in the other room, and if I was to bring the camera down, you'd just see my bare feet, because that's a little shocking thing. I'll tell you that I'm recording tonight in bare feet.
Why not, brother? Why not?
I don't know. I don't know how that's going to make our listeners feel. We might lose a few listeners off the back of that. They might be disturbed by that idea, but I'm just putting it out there. Anyway, on that note, if it really bothers you, you can always go and see if you can have it scrubbed from your mind. And that's a little bit about what happens in the film that we're talking about in the second half of our very memorable double feature about memories. George, would you like to, because this was your choice tonight, this is what you put forward as a recommendation. So would you like to take it away and introduce our listeners a little bit to a film that probably doesn't need much of an introduction, because I think it is pretty much an acknowledged classic now. It's a kind of acknowledged kind of masterpiece and really great film. And it's called The Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind.
That's right.
So,
Yes, it's Eternal Sunshine Coming. The name of the film, it's from a poem by Alexander Pope entitled Eloisa to Abelard. And the opening lines goes so: how happy is the blameless vestal's lot, the world forgetting, by the world forgot, eternal sunshine of the spotless mind. So there we go, Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind.
Isn't there a little bit more later on where she says, "Blessed are the forgetful"?
Ah,
They get
yes,
the
yes, you
better even of their blood.
absolutely. Each prayer accepted and each wish resigned. Blessed are the forgetful, for they get the better even of their blunders.
So that's a key sort of
Mm,
message for this film, isn't it?
mm,
absolutely. Do we choose, if we could, erase painful memories that are often accompanied with the good memories too? Let's say being in a relationship, would we choose to do so, and what is the cost of doing so? And yeah, that's the question it asks. Quite a good question. I'm sure we've all been in situations where, after a particularly painful relationship, we just want to forget about that person and almost erase him from our mind. But we forget about all the good times as well, and how we also learn from the bad times. I know from past relationships I've had about where I could have been better in terms of how things broken down, and you carry that forward into successes of the future. Yeah,
mm,
it's a very interesting film, and I love the way that they structured it as well.
Mm.
Starting at midpoint and they go back, and incredible movie. Yeah, what did you all think, gents?
Well, I really liked it. I mean, I saw it when it came out, and I remember liking it then. And it's interesting actually because I was talking to one of my colleagues, Ken, who's been a guest here, and about the film, this being one of the choices, and he said, "Yeah, it's interesting because it was such a big film when it came out, so a lot of hype about it. Why don't you write down what you thought about it in your mind, sort of what you've been carrying around, your memories of it, and then when you see it, see how they measure up."
mm,
And so I did that, and I have to say, I guess I couldn't remember an enormous amount about the plot because, well, it's quite convoluted, and but there's sort of certain images that I could remember, like sort of books sort of disappearing and things like this, and yeah, but I think actually it holds up, and even though there was a lot of hype around it, uh, it's still a really good film, and so yeah, I think that I enjoyed it the first time, and I enjoyed it more recently, and I guess it is maybe it's a sort of film of your 20s and 30s, a bit more, but it's still great. Yeah,
I actually agree with you there about 20s and 30s. Absolutely, it is. I think it relates to a lot of people within that age bracket.
yeah,
yeah. I think when you get to sort of more, our age, you're kind of a bit more settled in.
Mm,
And like you say, you've gone through all that stuff and you've learned all the pitfalls and the mistakes you've made in other relationships and other situations. So you kind of get to a point now where you can look at the film and sort of see it in a different way, I think,
Hmm.
which I quite enjoyed because, like you, I hadn't seen it for quite some time,
Mm.
and I don't think I really had remembered it quite as much as I kind of thought I had, because I sort of had a picture in my mind about how I remembered it. And then when I saw it, I didn't even remember Kirsten Dunst was in it or Mark Ruffalo. I
Hmm.
didn't remember any of that at all. Any of that sort of little subplot with, you know, Elijah Wood's character and the fact that he took um, the main character's sort of files and things, and then tried to use that to worm his way into Kate Winslet's favor. I'd forgotten about all that part of it,
Mm.
and my memories of it weren't as complex as the film actually is. So
Yeah.
I think that's kind of an interesting um, side of it as well.
Yeah.
Um, but I definitely agree that it holds up remarkably well. It's incredibly clever and fun. I wouldn't outright describe it as a comedy, would you? Because
No.
I
Drama.
because in my mind I'd sort of remembered it as a comedy film. Maybe it's just because
Oh,
of Jim Carrey's in it, but it isn't actually really.
no.
I mean, it has its little moments of whimsy, if you will, and much like a lot of the Philip Kaufman, the chap who wrote the screenplay, a lot of his stuff is like that. It's not ha ha funny, but it's kind of more whimsical and it's more base. It's fun in the sense of its kind of cleverness and its playfulness with ideas and things. But it's not an outright sort of comedy film, is it? It's
No.
No.
more a drama.
Yeah.
It is. Yeah, that was the thing. I think which I wrote down my thoughts from. According to the Ken's suggestion, I love the fact that both uh, Jim Carrey and Kate Winslet were in roles unlike their sort of not what we expected at the time,
Mm.
because he's a funny man, but here he's in a drama, and Kate
Mm,
Winslet, I suppose she's better known as sort of period dramas, maybe
yeah,
certainly Titanic, and here she was like a blue-haired sort of bohemian, and it was
yeah.
quite different as well. And
Yeah, and very sort of like a different kind of character. She wasn't all prim and proper, but she's very sort of, spontaneous and
exactly,
compulsive and, a little bit very sort of moody and her, has a lot of sort of mood swings
yeah,
and things like that. And I guess at the time, yeah, you wouldn't have necessarily associated that with her sort of at least in the popular. I mean, obviously she's very she has a lot of range as an actress, obviously, and she's been in lots of different things since.
yeah,
But at the time, yeah, for both of them, it seemed
Mm.
like a bit of a stretch for them in
Well,
terms of their
if,
personas.
if you look at like Jim Carrey, some of the movies he had just done before that, you got things like Bruce Almighty, How the Grinch Stole Christmas, Me, Myself, Irene. He did do Man on the Moon though as well, which was that
sure.
was a good one, goodie. But yeah, definitely a break from the from how he thought people perceived him to be, which is
Yeah.
brilliant.
And Kate Winslet was in Heavenly Creatures, that Peter Jackson film, where
Ah,
she's sort of slightly sort of out there
correct.
character in that as well. But I
Yeah,
mean, I guess by and large, this was a bit different.
Mm.
yeah. I
In,
thought it was quite interesting today when I was reading up a little bit about the film in preparation for our conversation tonight about some of the steps that they took to rein Jim Carrey's sort of, because he's obviously has quite broad humor, like a lot of physical comedy, and he's sort of a little bit sort of, I don't know what's the word, but he's quite energetic
yeah.
comedic actor. So in this, they had certain rules about they would sometimes film him when he didn't realize they were filming. They were just sort of doing
Ah,
a rehearsal or something, and so they'd turn the camera on and he didn't realize it, so that they would kind of catch him when he was just being a little bit more relaxed. And they also had certain rules about how he wasn't allowed to improvise, because obviously he's someone who very much builds like he's great at improvising, isn't he?
Yeah,
He's very quick-witted and he's always on fire like that, very much kind of like Robin Williams was, that sort
yeah,
of constant sort of improvising and bringing things out on the moment.
Yeah.
But in this, they had a strict rule that they said he wasn't allowed to improvise. He had to stick to the script. But no one else had that rule. They were all allowed to be
Ah,
relaxed and do what they wanted. So that sort of gave him more of a sort of a closed, where he had to maybe sort of concentrate more and not go off on sort of tangents, if you will. So I thought that's quite interesting, clever way to sort of keep him more subdued. And I think it really works well because for his character, it's brilliant because you can see like it's in there. He's a bit repressed and a bit sort of holding all these sort of
Yes.
emotions and things in. Um, but you can see it's there, just kind of bubbling under the surface, and he kind of wants to let all these things out. And then it's a great juxtaposition with Kate Winslet's character, who's very much like that, who just lets it all out, kind of thinks out loud and lets everything sort of just happen as she thinks it, sort of thing.
yeah.
So the pairing of them together is quite interesting. So
Yeah, I
They're,
think
they're very different, aren't they?
yeah,
yeah, very much so,
Very different
very
characters.
much so.
that does give the film a lot of its interesting power. Actually, what you mentioned about holding Jim Carrey back, I never thought about that. Yeah, it gives that extra little bit. But yeah, so the spotless mind being one without any experience, so in a way, meaningless, and yeah, just an interesting question about how we choose to reflect and actually cherishing both the good and the bad, and how we learn, and how if we had no memory at all, that yeah, how do we learn? How do we progress as people? Yeah.
Well, yeah, exactly. You'd always be stuck in a rut if you
Mm,
never
that's
sort
it.
of were able to reflect on your mistakes,
Yeah.
or even just not necessarily mistakes, but just where things went wrong, or
Yeah.
what that is an interesting idea to sort of think that your bad memories are just as much part of your personality as the good ones, and it's about sort of reconciling the two
Yeah.
and trying to
Yeah.
find value even in I mean, because it's true. I mean, I can think of previous relationships that haven't worked out, but I can also think of a lot of good qualities in those people,
Mm.
even if ultimately we weren't compatible or things didn't sort of go work out the way we might have wanted. You can still sort of look back and you can appreciate the good things as well as the bad things, and the nice times that you
Yeah.
had as well as the things that weren't so great. So
Yeah.
But
But what it does, this is one of the great lines in it, because it does have some great dialogue. Because Charlie
yes.
Kaufman is, brilliant scriptwriter, and this is one of the brilliant bits about losing your memory, what it would really mean. And he says, what when he goes to this company to sort of see about having this part of his memory erased, and they said, it's not going to give me brain damage, is it? And the chap behind the desk says, technically speaking, or Kirsten Dunst says, technically speaking, the procedure is brain damage.
yeah,
I enjoyed that.
yeah,
Yeah, that's a
yeah.
good line. How about it, chaps? When you all saw the movie back 20 years ago, we were mentioning earlier about how it's we can relate to perhaps a bit more in our 20s and 30s. What kind of place were you guys in? Was it had you just come out of any kind of relationship, or was it a hard hitting film for you when you saw it? Did it make you question things about your relationship at the time, or I mean, what was the headspace at the time for you, chaps?
But personally, I would
Yeah,
say,
yeah, yeah.
yeah, I would. There was definitely elements of it that I could say, yeah,
Yes.
that sort of regret tinged with, yeah, actually. But it's nice because I suppose the messages of acceptance of all this
Mm,
stuff and the importance of memories,
Mm.
that's it.
and
Yeah.
spotless mind in this occasion is not so useful. Yeah, but it also has this sort of hopeful. It's quite romantic as well because it basically the sort of the end of the story, or the end of the story, is that they sort of meet again, isn't it?
Yes.
Yes.
And which
And
might
it's an
be,
interesting dynamic that because they both hear what each other thinks of each other, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
And yet the implication is still that they're perhaps going to
Absolutely.
accept that and
Yes.
move on. I mean, that's one interpretation. I mean, I kind of thought there was another way you could interpret the film, is that they're kind of caught in this perpetual loop as
Yeah.
well.
Ooh, wow.
Couldn't you?
Yeah.
You could sort of think that they're just going to sort of repeat the same process over again, really.
But I think my feeling was there that when it comes to hearing that sort of bad stuff, in a sense, brings it back to sort of reality, that there's sort of things that we have to essentially forget and sort of get over, or accept
Yeah,
and get over it, in
except
order to
yeah,
sort of get
because I
on.
mean, yeah, I mean, because any relationship ultimately is built on that, is just accepting the other person's sort of flaws and
Yeah.
things maybe that you don't like, and just balancing that out with the things that you do, and that you kind of, you have to weigh all those things up, because nobody is perfect, are they? Like, I'm quite sure none of us would claim to be, and I don't think I've ever met anyone who's flawless. Although, of course, you chaps come very close.
Yeah.
But you see, I mean, that's a good point, that the film that you could take from the film too, is that ultimately you just have to make a decision about whether on balance you can accept the flaws. And um and it, and it's also so much about relationships is just about expectations as well, because there's a great bit where when Jim Carrey is trying to stop the process because he realizes what
Love
he's
that.
done and he wants to get out of it, and there's a
Yeah.
great bit. So it's interesting because he can sort of reflect on his own memories. And there's a certain moment where he's talking to Kate Winslet's character, and she kind of says, "Oh, men always want this from me. They want me to be this, and they want me to be that." And that's kind of a lot of like people go into relationships with expectations of the other
Mm,
person, don't they?
Yeah.
They kind of project these things onto somebody else, and that is kind of where things go wrong, isn't it? Because another person can never really meet your expectations, can they? It's almost an impossibility. And so at
yeah.
some point you have to be able to reconcile that, that no person is going to ever really be able to do that. So then you have to then weigh up whether you can accept
Mm,
that and move forward.
Yeah.
And so I think that's a nice sort of thing that's brought out in those conversations as they're going
yeah.
through. They're kind of, he's taking her, and he's trying to basically run away from the memories that are being erased, so that he can hang on to some things. And that's great. I mean, it's incredibly clever too, all those bits where things start to disintegrate
Incredible.
and then
Yeah.
to try to run into different, he kind of says, "Oh well, this memory, you weren't in it originally, so if you come and be in this memory now, then they won't erase you." And it's all that kind of side of it too, and it's almost like becomes like a chase film in a
Yeah. It is. Yeah.
weird sort of way.
That's it. Well, this is where it has something in common with Aftersun. It has elements of horror in it as well.
Yeah.
And perhaps Jacob's Ladder, or Francis Bacon, or something, where there's all these people with sort of horrible, sort of blank faces with no
Yeah, yeah,
features,
featureless faces and
featureless
things like that.
faces,
Yeah,
and which is, yeah, that sort of in the darkness, and it's yeah, quite unsettling.
yeah, and very dreamlike as well. I mean, you can have, sometimes you can have dreams where things are kind of a bit indistinct in a way, and like
Yeah,
it's more like a feeling or a sort of a representation of something, but it's not concrete, and it's not a real sort of concrete person or a recognizable face or anything like that.
yeah,
So all those little touches were great. I mean, it's incredibly creative film in the way that the different ways that they showed these things, and just sort of trolling through memories.
Mm,
And that's what I thought, because again, it can just be a film just about grief, about how people process their grief.
yeah.
mm,
When either when a relationship doesn't work out, or they have a death in the family, or any kind of thing like that. there's that process that you go through about processing all those memories and that sort of stuff in your head, and so the film captures that really well, I thought, as well. So
I quite like the one. What for me was very poignant was when while he was being operated, or his memory was being erased, and he was like, "Oh no, can I just hang on to this memory? Don't take
mhm.
this memory away." That for me sums up a lot of the film for me about careful what you wish for, because memories are precious, be they good or bad.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Yeah,
comes
yeah.
as one package.
And
Another.
ultimately, that's all you have left
Mm,
of the past, isn't it?
Yeah,
yeah,
You can't hang on to concrete, anything concrete,
one
can
of,
you? All you have is those memories, good or bad.
mm.
That's what you have.
I wondered if, in some sense, it's a sort of representation of dementia, basically.
Well, yes, yeah,
Yeah.
yes,
Well,
absolutely.
that's an interesting, yeah.
Wow,
Another thing I really liked about it is there's one of the other elements is it's a sort of satire on offices and work,
Mm.
and like basically there's sort of when they're doing the procedure, he's lying on the bed and he's got this sort of mad helmet on, which
Mm.
and they're sort of zapping his memories. Actually, the spotless mind, they're getting rid of the spots in his mind,
Yes,
you know.
literally.
yes.
And
Yeah.
but then old Kirsten Dunst and Mark Ruffalo start sort of getting basically get stoned and put on music and start leaping around on the bed next to him,
Yes, exactly.
and it's just hilariously funny. It just made me think of sort of work and how when people are meant to be serious at work,
Yeah,
they're sort of sloping off and doing things they shouldn't be,
yeah,
and even something like this maybe.
true.
Yeah.
Wow,
Yeah,
yes.
yeah.
But
Well,
interesting when looking at the two films together. The impression I got was both great films. Perhaps Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind being a bit more commercially produced, to appeal to to have a commercial value, whereas Aftersun for me had a bit more of the had a bit more of an artistic
Yeah.
flavor to it. Like when you said, David, about peeling away all the layers, and just coming down. It is interesting having those two films together. I thought,
Yeah, definitely. That is it's more of an art film, really, and this
Mm.
one is, but it's very inventive and
Very inventive,
yeah,
yes.
enjoyable, and well written and well performed,
Yeah.
and it's terrific. But it does.
yeah, absolutely. I mean, it was a fairly mainstream film, but I
Mm.
think it definitely has a great artistic quality to it. It's very
Yeah,
Absolutely.
incredibly clever and well
Yeah.
well conceived, and because a lot. I mean, at its heart, it is kind of a high concept sort
Yeah.
of idea. But
yeah,
I guess what separates it from a lot of sort of more commercial films is that the fact that it is handled in a much more clever and creative
Absolutely.
and perceptive way. It has some genuine
Mm.
clever observations about people and about these ideas that we're talking
Yeah, and like you mentioned
about
earlier,
memories and grief and how
absolutely.
we relate to one another and and work and all those things. So it is. I think it definitely is a quite valid, you know, um, artistic statement, but it's an accessible one,
yeah,
because
Mm.
not all great films have to be arty and serious and
Mm.
obtuse in order to be good.
It had that
Um,
awesome balance, you're right, between being
yeah,
commercial and being very creative and artistic as well. Great, amazing, amazing
yeah,
film.
yeah, absolutely. There's all
Yeah,
different types of ways that you can
yeah,
get at the heart of things, isn't there? And sometimes some people do it in a really accessible, fun, entertaining way, and sometimes people take a different approach. And that's what it's all. That's what's
mm.
it's great about having different types of films, and yeah,
Good
it's
choice to
good
have it
stuff.
together. Yeah, absolutely. And like you say, I think it can have have the mantle of classic, can't it? I mean, it's a great film. It's
I
yeah,
think so.
I
I
think
think
it's
so. Definitely,
yeah.
it's a film that I think is pretty much established. I've never heard
Mm.
anyone say they didn't like it, or I've
Yeah,
never heard any real, genuinely sort of critical sort of. You asked about how, like, I remember really enjoying it at the time when it came out. I don't think I've seen it since, though. I don't think it's something I've ever gone back and revisited until now. So thank you, George, for that, because I did really enjoy it and
Cool.
thought it was interesting. And like you say, it's nice to go back and visit things when you're at a different time in
Yeah.
life as well, because then you can take different things out of it and sort of reflect on it in a different way. So I think that's quite valuable as well.
A bit like in Aftersun, where it's all about sort of
Hmm.
looking back, in a sense, the some
Yeah,
memories from 20 years before, getting something very different out of it.
yeah,
Yeah,
definitely.
two great films. Go and watch them.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Was there anything else you guys wanted to say or?
Oh yeah, one thing I wanted to say about the director of Charlotte of Aftersun is that the director Charlotte Wells, her
Yes.
her father died when she was 16. So I think there's some sort of autobiographical sort of elements in Aftersun.
Hmm.
And there are a number of her short films on YouTube. I think I've seen two of them. I think there might be one or maybe two more. And
Oh,
there's one called Tuesday, which is really that one that really stands out. It's 10 minutes or 11 minutes or maybe 6 minutes, but it's short.
okay. And does it kind of tie in thematically with Aftersun or?
That's a bit, yeah. I mean, it's all set in Scotland because she's Scottish, so it's not sort of in the Med, but you can say, ah, yeah, I get it. That's another part of the story, essentially. Yeah. So look it up.
Brilliant. Yeah, folks, you should check that out. And so I guess it's a good point. We never really talked about how we saw Aftersun. We're obviously recording this in early May of 2024, and we're based in the UK, all three of us. So listeners in the United States, obviously we're not able to point you too much in where you can see Aftersun. Although I think Aftersun it was a co-production with BBC, and I think was Mubi involved in it as well. I don't
Okay.
know. I'd have to look again.
Not sure about
But anyway, I watched Aftersun on BBC iPlayer because it's available on there at the minute in the UK anyway.
that. Yeah.
And it's free of charge, folks, as well. So you won't have to pay if you have access to the iPlayer, you can watch it. George, how did you see it? Was that the same as you?
I saw it on BBC iPlayer. I see it's also available on Curzon for £4
Okay.
and Apple TV as well.
Oh, brilliant.
As well as Amazon Prime Video, all charged, but I mean £3.49, £4, and £4.99 respectively.
Okay.
Yeah,
So for some reason, if you're in the UK and you don't want to watch it for free on the BBC,
yeah.
then you are welcome to go and pay a rental charge
That's what.
to the other streaming vendors. But of course, if you're listening to this show sometime in the future when maybe the BBC no longer has it available, then you'll have to find an alternative method
Nice.
of watching it. And again, we can't speak for the United States because we don't know where it's available there. But I suspect if you check out Mubi or some other streaming services like Amazon and etc., that you may find it fairly easily, and it's definitely worth a look.
Very much.
Um, Now, the eternal sunshine of the spotless mind, I would imagine it's probably not that hard to come by in general. I didn't really look into it because I happen to have the fair. This came out
I
fairly
looked to see
recently, but
where.
it's the Kino 4K Blu-ray
Wow.
that I think it came out last year, and I picked that up, and I'm glad that I had an excuse to take the shrink wrap off and put it in the player and give it a view because it was really enjoyable, and I like that. How did you guys watch it?
I
I
watched.
watched it.
Sorry,
Sorry. After you, Jonathan, yeah.
I watched it on Amazon Prime, and I paid I think £2.50 to rent it.
Bargain. Okay. How about you, George?
I had purchased it on iTunes. So I watched it on Apple TV, and it's also on Sky Cinema. If anyone subscribes to Sky Cinema,
Well, there you
yeah, yeah,
go. Okay.
that's it. Yeah.
Well, there you go. So it's available in there, and of
Mm.
course we know because we're not being sponsored or anything by anyone, so we can't condone or otherwise whatever way that you choose to watch the film. But we're just pointing you in the direction of those particular organizations. So it'll be up to the viewer to decide how to access it. But I think Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind is probably fairly accessible.
Yeah.
You know, because it's quite a well-known film with big stars in it and stuff. So I think you'll find it easy to get hold of that one. Right. Well, folks, have we got anything else to say about our,
Nope.
George, have you got anything exciting coming up aside from our little collab that we recently did, which will be coming soon?
Just episodes of Film Swap. I'm looking forward to hearing. On the podcast. Yeah, that's what I'm looking forward to. you guys are brilliant. Thank you for having me on your show. You guys are top notch. Yeah, really, really good. And your film is always interesting and very educational and entertaining as well. It's the whole package, entertaining and educational. Thanks, guys. You guys are great.
Oh, well, thank you, George. Thank you very much. That's nice, mate. And thank you very much for joining us again. And hopefully you'll come back and maybe talk to us another time. We'll check out some other films.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Thank you very much. That's very, very kind words. But it's great to have you on. And I think, two really interesting films taking a sort of slightly different angles on this mysterious memory business. I think that's what.
Would you say then it's fair to say that this is going to be a very memorable episode?
I've heard.
I'm not sure if I can really remember.
I heard something that when you remember something, you aren't actually remembering the incident itself, but you're recalling your last memory of the incident, or maybe your last memory of the incident.
Exactly.
Who knows? Yeah.
All the mirrors in there.
That's it.
Yes, indeed.
Yeah.
Yes, indeed. Well, folks, we want to thank you for tuning in and listening in tonight. And of course, we'd love to hear from you if you have any comments that you want to make about anything that we talked about on the show or the films that we discussed, or you want to suggest your own memorable films about memories and about remembering. And about all the sort of issues that came up in these films, by all means, drop us a line because we'd love to hear from you. So we're going to be back in a couple of weeks to talk about some more really cool films. And hopefully we'll see you then. And until then, folks, please take care of yourselves and enjoy lots of great films. So we'll see you soon.
Yeah. Bye.
Bye. See you later.
Oh, the things these nerdy middle-aged men get up to.